to try to revert this, overturn it, modify it, whatever?
Sure. I think Christy brought up a good proposed solution at the hearing back in March. And by the way, that was, I thought, an extraordinary display of unity among the municipal leaders. That my experience is in the south suburbs, the mayors don't try to undercut one another. They don't try to outcompete one another. I think the feeling is we're all in this together. If a manufacturer or a retailer comes to the town next door, that benefits my town as well. And I think that, to the credit of the municipal leaders, they're doing all they can. But like when we talk about, maybe there are other policy areas where there could be some help to the region. And you may have forgotten, but I remember one suggestion you made was taking a look at sort of what the vacancy rate or the tax rate for vacant properties. It's assessed the same as farmland. So there's no incentive to occupy vacant properties. Perhaps if the county raised the assessment rate for vacant properties, there would be a greater incentive to fill those vacancies. Now, granted, there are always challenges, as we've heard, to filling vacant storefronts and so on, but now there's less of an incentive because the owner pays lower taxes if the property is vacant, so there's no incentive to fill that vacancy. So maybe that's one thing that commissioners could do to address this.
All right.
And I would just add, I think one of the challenges that we had, Ted mentioned that we tried to present data during our testimony, not only asking the municipalities to talk about very concrete examples of what happened in their community, how Class 8 or other tax incentives benefited them and how much more challenging it would be, or the projects that they lost because the pro formas still couldn't work, and we heard from hoteliers and others. But I want to say that it was the first time in county board memory that many mayors showed up to discuss an issue. And unfortunately, we did not prevail. And our work is cut out for us to try to understand the challenges going forward. The private sector is required to do a lot more in terms of reporting and other things like that. We think that that's going to be a challenge to them in addition to the increased costs. So one of the things that we're trying to do is generate the data so that we're making policy decisions based on facts, and we're forecasting what we know and what we can predict so that we can actually understand the implications of what our elected officials at the county are what decisions, how they're making their decisions.
So go ahead, John, please.
No, I was just going to say that Ted and Christy bring up some really good points in terms of what we can do, and I think in addition to that, we have to make sure that we're casting a wider net in terms of who we're talking to about these. So you mentioned the commissioners. One of the things that we learn is that the commissioners are not the only front in those policy decisions. And so while we may not necessarily, and not only are they not the only front, there are, 17 commissioners. So first of all, if you're only talking to 3 or 4, now you've only got 3 or 4 votes. But the other thing is there are other people that are involved in this decision. There are other stakeholders, organized labor, et cetera. And so as we craft our story and as we tell that story, we have to make sure that we're telling it to as many people who can affect the decision as possible.
And I think that's one of the things that we're challenged to do. We're trying to incorporate now is to say, as costs are increasing, projects will slow down. So we, as you know, we're going to have a new assessor come December. We've already been briefing the presumptive nominee, trying to ensure that he understands this, what I will say is the South Suburban challenge. And we've been, really kind of forecasting this is the perfect tax storm. I mean, some decisions made in Springfield, complicated by decisions made at the county board in Cook County, have increased the challenges here. And our message to all of these folks are one size public policy, tax policy does not work because of the special characteristics. Again, the trifecta or the 4 components that I mentioned before, the legacy issue, the commercial redlining, the geography, and now the existing tax rates. Those have to be special criteria in anyone's equation as we're looking at a solution.
Okay. So at the state level, in terms of, what do you think we can do in terms of working with state leadership as well? Is there anything
So
in
I'll
particular?
answer. So we have a legislative committee that meets regularly. We always, as an organization, the South Suburban Mayors and Managers develops a policy action agenda. We have accelerated our timetable this year so that we can start to introduce what I will say is kind of an economic focus initiative with our area legislators, who have been very receptive to this. As I mentioned earlier, you know, the South Suburbs have been languishing in terms of economic vitality since the 80s. That hasn't changed, it's just gotten harder. And now we need to really focus on what tools we can bring back to the South Suburbs, and is there a legislative, you know, are there partners in Springfield that can help us do that?
Excellent. With new leadership being seated also in January,
correct.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
that's going to create a fresh opportunity to have some open dialogue with them as
I
well.
agree.
So Ted,
Bringing it back to the beginning,
Okay.
the legislature with its new school funding formula is helping the South Suburbs a little bit
Yes.
because of the extra money that's coming to the historically underfunded districts down here. So we aren't as reliant on property taxes.
Yes.
So every little bit helps.
Sure.
You know, I like to think of it as like the climate change almost, because I mean you could look. And people like John and Christy can say, if you do this, it's really going to make it worse, right? But we won't know until we have that data. And those data might be a year or two down the road in terms of the foreclosures and so on. But right now, what I'm hearing anecdotally from taxing districts is that the collection rate is precipitously falling. In Chicago, for example, the rate of taxes collected is like 98%. That's pretty normal. That's where it should be. But I'm hearing in some communities it's 85, 80. In places like Harvey, as low as 50. You know, this is dangerous because it's because of vacant properties and so on. People walking away. I'm not able to pay these taxes. Where in those tax dollars are used to fund schools.
Sure.
So
And services.
and
Yeah,
services, parks and fire and
Yeah,
police,
emergency services.
libraries. So again, this is maybe an early indicator that these very concerning low tax collection rates that may not be reflected in other data until a year or so down the line, but it's a grave concern, and you better believe the anecdotes that you're hearing from people about the negative impact collectively of all these different policies.
So, Christy, you all are doing something, or many of the towns, I think 5, correct me if I'm wrong, on doing an advisory referendum. And what's that all about? That's coming up in November, I think.
That's correct.
On the ballot. So, will you please explain what that's why you're doing it?
Yeah, so the South Suburban Mayors and Managers asked our Cook County municipalities to pass a resolution in late August that would place an advisory referenda question on the ballot in front of the voters. And it really asks a very simple question, and I'm paraphrasing here, but should Cook County have a robust tax incentive program that helps lower property taxes for all property owners? And the answer is yes or no. And really what we wanted to see, if the electorate's voice, the constituents of the mayors and the county board commissioners and the other elected officials believe that we should be proactive trying to address the high property tax concerns of our residents. And we think there's going to be an overwhelming support for this. Now, it's in front of 4 municipalities, so if you're in Thornton, Midlothian, Hazel Crest, or Richton Park, you'll have an opportunity to vote yes on this referendum. Should Cook County have a robust economic development incentive program? And we specifically chose those communities because they represent the quadrants within the townships and give us a little bit of it'll give us some insight into how our constituents the residents of the community weighing in on this issue. And so we're going to wait until November 7th to see the results of that.
Excellent.
But we think that'll add to the voice of the officials that have been down clamoring about this.
Adding data points then around
That's
this,
right.
this issue as well. So, this is a complex issue as we wrap this up, and but it's important upon all of us to create the dialogue around this subject matter so that we can expand the conversation, because the fewer the people that understand it, the less change is going to take place, because ultimately it has to get to the grassroots level for people to understand what's in it for me and how is it impacting me. I think you guys have done a great job of demystifying it. But as we wrap up, I just want to give you a few seconds to really just say, what would you like to see as a result of the changes that we could be brought forth to the Class 8? Is there anything in particular that you see that will have an impact on the south suburbs if we get it changed, if we get the Class 8 changed?
Well, I think if we get the Class 8 changed, one of the things I didn't bring up was that, in South Holland, we've done 53 Class 8s in a 10-year period. That vacancy rate our vacancy rate went from 16-17% down to 3%. That's real impact. And so I think we can all agree that if the Class 8 remains the way that it should, or at least with the input that everyone agrees on, I think it can continue to have that kind of impact. And I'm confident that it will, and I would hope that the residents, I hear residents really kind of giving other communities a hard time about businesses leaving, et cetera, understand, as Christy mentioned, there were record numbers of mayors they're supporting, and their mayors and their elected officials are supporting these changes. It's just that we just need additional help to make sure it happens.
And you know what, John, we are out of time on that note. So no, thank you very much. I wish we're gonna have to come back and do another show.
Sorry.
I thank you very much for being with us today. This is a very complex issue. We're gonna have to have more dialogue around this so we all learn more about it. I'm learning. I want to bring more subject matter experts to have the discussion and help us understand it. But thank you very much for being with us. I'm Jeff Cohn of Brave Dialogue.